The letter arrived at Windsor before breakfast, sealed in the heavy cream envelope reserved for family instruments of authority. Prince William did not open it in front of the household. He carried it into the private study, closed the door, and set it on the desk beneath the lamp. The wax bore the imprint of the Wales cipher, but the seal had been broken once before and pressed shut again by hands that were not his own. Inside lay a single request concerning the Diana covenant, the private ceremonial directive left by his mother that transferred a protected patronage title to the woman who would one day stand beside him as Princess of Wales. The name written on the receiving line was not Catherine's. William removed his glasses. He pressed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. He did not speak for a long minute. Then he folded the letter in half, then again, and placed it face down on the leather blotter. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The Diana Covenant was not a public document. It was a written instruction, drafted in Diana's own hand in the last months of her life, entrusted to the Prince of Wales's private secretariat, and sealed by the Lord Chamberlain's office in the winter of 1996. It concerned a single ceremonial title, one Diana had held quietly during her years of hospice work, a patronage designation known inside the household as the guardian of the vulnerable trust, an honorary role tied to a network of children's hospices, hospitals for the incurable, and shelters for the abandoned. The covenant stipulated that the title would pass to no reigning consort, no visiting royal, no honorary member. It would pass only to the woman married to her eldest son, and only after a period of demonstrated service. Diana had written the words herself in blue ink. She had underlined the phrase, "earned, not granted." Catherine, Princess of Wales, had been informed of the covenant on the morning of her wedding. She had not spoken of it publicly. She had waited 13 years. The transfer ceremony had been scheduled for the autumn. King Charles had known of the letter within the hour. He read it twice in the sitting room at Highgrove, then set it aside without comment. His hand rested on the arm of the chair. He looked out toward the garden his first wife had loved. The father in him wished to protect both his sons. The monarch in him understood that a covenant sealed by the Lord Chamberlain could not be renegotiated by request. He asked his private secretary to arrange a call to Montecito. He did not raise his voice. He never did. Prince William had returned from a morning engagement in Cardiff to find the letter waiting. His wound was not the request itself. His wound was the timing. Catherine had been in remission for 11 months. The autumn ceremony had been drafted around her strength, around her calendar, around the private assurance that she would stand at the altar of St. George's Chapel and receive the title her mother-in-law had preserved for her. The letter proposed an alternate recipient. The letter proposed Meghan. Catherine had not yet been told. William intended to keep it that way until he understood the shape of the request. She had spent the previous week at Anmer Hall with the children, riding in the mornings, reading in the afternoons. The wound she carried was not one of jealousy. It was one of continuity. Diana had chosen her. Diana had written her name into the instruction in shorthand. The one my son marries first, and who stays. Catherine had honored that instruction through hospice visits she never publicized, through hospital wards she entered without cameras, through nights she sat with grieving families and did not speak of it afterward. The guardian of the vulnerable trust was not a decoration. It was a promise. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, had signed the letter in Montecito. Her motivation, as recorded in a documented private account of the correspondence, was framed in the language of legacy. She wrote that Diana had been a mother to her in spirit, that the work of the trust aligned with the archewell of her own foundation, that a shared stewardship would honor the late princess more completely than a single inheritance. She used the word reclaim. She used the word store. She did not use the word earn. Prince Harry had not co-signed the letter. His name appeared nowhere on the page. A recorded conversation between the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, later summarized in an internal briefing to the Prince of Wales's office, described him as reluctant, then silent, then absent from the room when the letter was sealed. The chain of custody of the covenant began to matter. William asked for the security log of the sealed cabinet in the Lord Chamberlain's archive. The log recorded 3 entries in the past 4 months. The first was routine, a quarterly audit conducted by the archivist. The second was a supervised viewing granted to Catherine in preparation for the autumn ceremony. The third entry was flagged. It bore the name of a former palace advisor, one Edmund Thorne, who had served briefly as an assistant private secretary in the Sussex household before the couple's departure from royal duties in 2020. Thorne had left the institution under a quiet arrangement. He had not been seen in the archive for 6 years. The log recorded his visit as a research consultation on behalf of the Diana Award Foundation, a claim the foundation later denied in a sealed clarification submitted to the Cabinet Office. Thorne was 58, silver-haired, precise in his manner. He had once been trusted with Diana's personal correspondence. He had catalogued the covenant himself in 1997. He knew where it was kept. He knew what it said. He had signed the visitor register with a hand that did not tremble. 6 months before the letter arrived at Windsor, a rehearsal had been held in the private chapel at Kensington. It was not a rehearsal for the ceremony itself. It was a rehearsal for the reading of the covenant, a rite the household called the voicing, in which the Lord Chamberlain would read the instruction aloud before 3 witnesses. Catherine had attended, William had attended, the Lord Chamberlain had attended. The 4th chair, reserved by tradition for a representative of the outgoing patron's family, had been left empty because Diana had no surviving parent to send. The voicing had been recorded, as all covenant rites were, in an audio log kept in the Lord Chamberlain's secure vault. The recording ran 17 minutes. It contained the full text of Diana's instruction, the naming of Catherine as the intended recipient, and the signatures of the 3 witnesses. It also contained, in the final minute, a passage Diana had added in her own voice, transferred to tape from a private cassette she had left with her private secretary. In the recording, Diana spoke of the trust as a quiet burden and asked that whoever received it should carry it without applause. Thorne had accessed a duplicate of that recording during his visit. The security log confirmed it. The audio file had been copied to a portable drive under his authorization code, an authorization code that had not been revoked after his departure. The oversight was administrative. The consequence was not. The recording traveled from London to a private address in Santa Barbara within 72 hours of the archive visit. It was accompanied by a memorandum, 3 pages in length, drafted by Thorne in the language of legacy stewardship. The memorandum proposed that Meghan, as the widow of a Diana Award laureate and as the mother of 2 of Diana's grandchildren, held a moral claim to the trust that predated the covenant's stipulation of marriage order. The memorandum used the word repation. It used the phrase living document. A documented private account of the exchange placed Meghan in her office at the time of the recording's arrival. She listened to it once, then a second time. She did not weep. She took notes on a legal pad. She underlined the phrase quiet burden. She wrote beside it, in her own hand, the words our platform. The letter to William was drafted the following week. It was not the first draft. It was the 4th. The earlier drafts, retained by Thorne, contained sharper language. The final version had been softened to the Register of Family Reconciliation. It requested a meeting. It requested a review. It did not request permission. The meeting was granted. William did not travel to Montecito. Meghan did not travel to Windsor. A secure video call was arranged for a Tuesday evening, London time, with no advisors present on either side. The Sussex end of the call showed a study lined with books, a single lamp lit, the Duchess in a cream blouse with her hair drawn back. The Wales end showed the private study at Windsor, the letter still on the desk, William in a dark jumper with his sleeves pushed to the elbow. The connection opened without preamble. Meghan spoke first. She spoke for 11 minutes. She spoke of Diana as a woman she had never met, but whose photograph she had kept on her desk at the age of 17. She spoke of the trust as work she had already begun, in different form, through her own foundation. She spoke of the covenant as an instrument written in a different century, for a different family, under different assumptions about who counted as kin. She spoke with controlled confidence. She did not raise her voice. She used the word share. She used the word together. She proposed a co-stewardship, one title held by two women, one inheritance divided into two seats. William listened without interruption. He did not remove his glasses this time. He did not fold his hands. He waited until she finished. Then he leaned forward and he said, "The covenant was not written for you." He did not elaborate. He did not soften. He pushed his chair back from the desk half an inch and let the silence hold. Meghan's expression did not change. She thanked him for his time. The call ended at 9:47 London time. William closed the laptop. He walked to the window. He drew the curtains himself. The letter remained on the desk for another hour. He did not touch it. He read a book of his mother's poetry that Catherine had left on the shelf. He did not sleep in the study. He returned to the family wing at 11:30 and did not speak of the call at breakfast. Catherine noticed. She did not ask. She poured his tea. She set a piece of toast on his plate. She placed her hand over his for the length of 2 seconds and then withdrew it. He nodded once. That was the extent of the conversation. The family council convened 3 days later in the Windsor Library, the room with the long oak table and the portrait of Queen Mary above the fireplace. King Charles sat at the head. Prince William sat to his right. Queen Camilla sat to his left. Princess Anne arrived without a bag, without a briefing folder, without a jacket. She had ridden that morning and had not changed her boots. She took her seat and did not speak until spoken to. The Lord Chamberlain entered with the sealed covenant on a small velvet cushion. He did not read from a folder. He read from the original instrument, the parchment written in Diana's hand. The ink faded to the color of dried lavender. He read the full text aloud. It took 9 minutes. The final phrase, "earned, not granted," was read twice, once at the passage's original place and once at the end, as tradition required. Charles listened without moving. The father in him understood that this was a rupture with his younger son's household. The monarch in him understood that a covenant sealed by the crown was not a matter of family sentiment. When the reading ended, he asked one question. He asked how the audio recording had left the archive. The security log was produced. Thorne's name was read aloud. The authorization code was read aloud. The date and time of the copy were read aloud. Anne's hand tightened on the arm of her chair. Camilla did not look up from the table. William did not react. He had known for 2 days. Charles asked for Thorne to be summoned. Thorne was already in London. He had checked into a small hotel in Marylebone the previous evening. He arrived at the library within the hour. He wore a gray suit. He carried no briefcase. He stood at the far end of the table because he had not been invited to sit. He did not deny the visit. He did not deny the copy. He described the memorandum as a service to the institution, an attempt to prevent a public dispute by proposing a private compromise. He said the word compromise 3 times. He said the word loyalty once. He said it without conviction. Anne spoke for the first time. She did not raise her voice. She said, "You catalogued that covenant. You knew what it meant. You knew who it was for." Thorne did not reply. He looked at the parchment on the velvet cushion. He looked at the king. He looked at the floor. Charles asked him to withdraw. Thorne bowed once, without grace, and left the room. The door closed behind him. The library was silent for a full minute. The internal briefing prepared for the council contained a second finding. A dormant email account, registered to the Sussex household in 2019 and never formally closed, had been reactivated in the weeks before the archive visit. 4 messages had been sent from the account to an address associated with Thorne. The messages did not contain the covenant text. They contained scheduling. They contained the phrase, "the trust," as we discussed. They contained a single instruction, "make it defensible." The account had not been used by Prince Harry. The account's activity log recorded a single user, logging in from a residence in Montecito, at hours consistent with California time. William did not raise his voice when the finding was read. He asked for the messages to be printed. He read them twice. He set them face down on the table. He said nothing. Camilla asked whether the Duke of Sussex had been informed. The internal briefing recorded that he had not. The account had been maintained under the Duchess's exclusive access since 2020. The story escaped the palace on a Thursday. It did not escape through the Lord Chamberlain's office. It did not escape through the Wales household. It escaped through a broadcast producer who had been briefed by an unnamed source with knowledge of the archive visit. The producer did not have the covenant text. The producer had the outline. The producer ran the story at 6 in the evening, London time, as a lead item. The coverage misrepresented the situation from the first minute. The title was called A Royal Honor rather than a covenant. The transfer was called a family gift rather than a sealed instruction. The dispute was framed as a rivalry between two women rather than a breach of a written directive left by a dead mother. Commentators debated on air. One commentator, a former royal correspondent turned columnist, described the covenant as a museum piece, and the Princess of Wales's claim to it as sentimental. Another, a constitutional historian, described the Sussex request as a reasonable modernization. A third, a former palace press officer, described the entire matter as a family quarrel dressed up in Latin. Catherine watched the coverage in the private sitting room at Adelaide Cottage. She sat on the sofa with her feet tucked beneath her, a cup of tea untouched on the side table. William sat beside her. He did not speak. She did not speak either, until the phrase "a museum piece" was spoken on the screen. She flinched. It was a small movement, no more than the tightening of the muscle at the corner of her jaw, but William saw it. He reached for the remote. She placed her hand on his wrist. She did not want the television turned off. She wanted to hear the rest. The phrase repeated twice more in the segment. Each time, Catherine's hand tightened slightly on William's wrist. When the segment ended, she rose without speaking, walked to the kitchen, and rinsed her cup. She dried it. She placed it on the shelf. She returned to the sitting room. She sat down again. She said it was not a museum piece to her. The next morning, the front pages carried the story. The palace issued no comment. The Wales household issued no comment. The Sussex office in California issued a short statement expressing surprise at the tone of the coverage and regret at the breach of a private family conversation. The statement did not mention the covenant. It did not mention the archive visit. It did not mention Thorne. Thorne had already left London. His departure was recorded by border officials at Heathrow at 4 in the morning. He had booked a flight to Lisbon. He had not left a forwarding address. William did not ask for retaliation. He asked for restraint. He met with his father in the Highgrove sitting room on the Sunday. The two men sat in armchairs facing the garden. A tea tray sat between them, untouched. William spoke for less than 3 minutes. He said the family did not need a public rebuke. He said the family did not need a legal proceeding. He said the family needed a boundary. Charles listened. The father in him wanted to protect his son from the labor of restraint. The monarch in him understood that the boundary William proposed was the only instrument left. He agreed. He asked what form the boundary should take. William said one word. He said, "written." The instrument was drafted the following week. It was called a sealed clarification, a formal instrument of the Lord Chamberlain's office that did not amend the original covenant but reaffirmed it in contemporary language. The clarification stated that the Diana Covenant was a private ceremonial directive of the late Princess of Wales, that its recipient had been named at its sealing in 1996, that the recipient was Catherine, Princess of Wales, and that no request, memorandum, or reinterpretation from any party would alter the instrument's meaning or its transfer. The clarification was signed by the King. It was countersigned by the Lord Chamberlain. It was sealed with the Privy Seal, the official emblem, proving that the instrument operated under Crown authority. The sealed clarification was not made public. It was filed in the archive alongside the original covenant. A copy was sent by courier to the Sussex residence in Montecito. The courier delivered it at 10 in the morning, California time. The Duchess signed for it. She carried it into her office. She placed it on the desk. A documented private account of the moment recorded that she did not open it for 4 hours. She sat at the desk. She looked at the envelope. She placed her phone face down on the blotter. She did not take calls. When she opened the envelope, she read the clarification once. She did not read it a second time. She placed it in a drawer. She closed the drawer. She drew the curtain of the office window. She sat in the half-light for the rest of the afternoon. The dormant email account was closed the following day. The closure was initiated from the Montecito residence. The closure was final. There was no explanation. Prince Harry was informed of the clarification by a private secretary in London on the Wednesday. He received the news in the garden of his home. He was told over the telephone. He listened without speaking. He asked one question. He asked whether his brother had been the one to request the clarification. The private secretary confirmed that the request had come from the Prince of Wales. Harry did not reply. He ended the call. He placed the phone face down on the garden table. He did not go back into the house for an hour. The autumn ceremony proceeded on schedule. The voicing was held in St. George's Chapel at 11 in the morning on the third Saturday of October. The chapel was closed to the public. The witnesses were the King, the Prince of Wales, the Lord Chamberlain, and Princess Anne, who had asked to attend. Catherine wore a plain wool coat over a navy dress. She did not wear jewels. She did not wear a hat. She stood before the altar and listened as the covenant was read aloud for the second time in its history. The Lord Chamberlain read the parchment in full. He read the phrase, "earned, not granted," at the appointed places. When the reading ended, Catherine did not speak. She placed her right hand on the altar. She bowed her head. She did not weep. William stood 3 paces behind her. His face did not move. Anne watched from the choir stalls. Charles watched from the sanctuary. The moment lasted 40 seconds. The transfer was complete. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was now the guardian of the vulnerable trust. The title was hers by covenant, by clarification, by right. It was hers by the promise a dying mother had made 29 years earlier to a son she would not live to see marry. The palace issued a brief statement on the Monday. It was 3 sentences long. It confirmed that the ceremonial transfer of a private patronage title had taken place at St. George's Chapel on the previous Saturday. It confirmed that the Princess of Wales had assumed the role in accordance with a directive left by the late Princess of Wales in 1996. It thanked the household staff for their discretion. It did not name Meghan. It did not name Thorne. It did not name the covenant. The fictional front page of a national daily on the Tuesday morning carried a single headline in bold type across the top of the page. It read, "Kate keeps Diana's promise." The subheading was smaller and did not name anyone else. The photograph beneath showed Catherine leaving Windsor with her head slightly bowed, her coat drawn against the wind. The institution recorded the matter as closed. A revised protocol for archive access was issued by the Lord Chamberlain's office within the month, tightening authorization procedures and revoking dormant credentials across all former household staff. Royal authority cannot be seized, borrowed, or pressured into a new shape by memorandum or reinterpretation. It is earned in the quiet years, in the wards no camera enters, in the promises kept long after the one who made them has died. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next.